Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming and joining me on this adventure. There's some very good presentations happening in the other room, so I appreciate you being here this morning. Thank you. Let's see, get this thing. Yes, okay. All right, so my name is Liz Graznak. I have Happy Hollow Farm. I'm located in central Missouri, pretty much due west of here, about 8.5 hours. The farm is entirely 82 acres. We're located in a valley. There's a creek that runs through the farm, so we have really beautiful soil. The creek doesn't really flood, so that's great. I have about 11 acres total in growing fields right now. Let me see if I can do a little. Oh, yes, good. This field across the road, I just started renting in 2023, so this is an additional 16 acres. And it's in transition to organic right now. The whole farm is certified organic and Real Organic Project certified. I have a small orchard that gets very little attention. I'm an organic vegetable grower primarily. I can't hear you. You can't hear me. How about that? Is that better? Okay. I'm really sorry. I like to walk around, so if you just wave at me if you can't hear me, and then that'll be like, hello, get back to the microphone. I like to walk around, so okay, I'll try and stay right here. I have about 23,000 square feet in covered high tunnel and caterpillar tunnel growing space. And yes, and this is the 16 acres that's over here in new land that's in transition. And this is my 14th year full-time farming on this farm. All right, so we're going to talk about crop profitability, maybe one of the least favorite things for some folks. I know it was a struggle for me for many years, but when talking about farming and being profitable and making a living doing this, I like to think about some initial key questions that we all, whether you're raising chickens or pigs or tomatoes or flowers, all need to be asking ourselves. So those questions are, how much money do I need to make in order to survive? Pay my mortgage, keep the electricity on. If you have employees, pay employees, et cetera, et cetera. Like, do you know that number? Super important. You gotta know that number. Do you have enough land in order to grow the crops, in order to make that number? I underestimated, when I first started, I underestimated how much space I was gonna need. Yeah. What tools and equipment do you have? I also underestimated the tools and equipment that I was going to need. My farming experience before starting at Happy Hollow was working for a number of other farms that were smaller scale in production than my current farm is. It was a great intro into farming, and I learned a whole lot. But they were smaller than the scale at which I needed to be at in order to be profitable. So I've had a steep learning curve the last few years. Who are you marketing to? Who are your customers? What is that customer base? How big is that customer base? Super, 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 super important. Because if you want to grow flowers and you don't have a customer base that has a lot of disposable income, you probably aren't going to sell a lot of flowers. And then what can you sell? Can you sell flowers? we grow a lot of flowers, but I'm marketing to a pretty big town, about 200,000, 220,000 people if you count the students that are in Columbia. And Columbia it's a university town. There's 3 hospitals there, relatively affluent town. And also, what do you enjoy growing? What do you enjoy selling, farming? My first couple of years, I was really diverse, and I raised pigs and put a lot of time into the orchard, and slowly I whittled some of that stuff out because they were not enjoyable for me. All right. So I am not a math person. Let's just be very frank. I can muddle my way through, and I have learned enough to have a really good understanding of what it takes to run the farm. But if you ask me any really crazy math questions, I'm going to look at you with a blank stare. Talking about crop profitability, like I said, it was really tough for me when I first got started farming because I didn't have enough background knowledge to process and really think about cost of production per square foot, per crop, because there's so many variables. So what I'm going to show you and how I have figured out what made sense for me is it's a fairly simple mathematical equation, and it doesn't take into account a bajillion factors, which there are a bajillion factors. It looks at net numbers, and it's what makes sense to me. And it's pretty simple, and I was going to ask you guys, so I'm going to ask you right now, where are you all at in your farming careers? Did you just start? Have you been doing it for 20 years? Are you growing produce? Are you raising animals? So that's what I'm after, to just have an idea of like where you guys are at. So let's do first, for 1 to 5 years. Who's in 1 to 5 years? Okay. Who's in 6 to 10 years? Okay. And who's in 11 to 20 years? Okay, awesome. Okay. Who is doing a diversified market vegetables farm? All right. Anybody growing flowers? Okay, a few of you. Animals? All right, okay. Who is farming for their sole living, sole income? You're doing this as your career to make a living. Okay. All right. Great. Okay. One other thing, as we go through, it is completely fine if you have questions as we're moving through the slides. It's not disruptive for me. I'd rather have more of a conversation than me stand up here and lecture to you. So feel free, raise your hand, holler if I don't see you, and ask questions. We've got an hour and a half, so it's a long time. So please, throw them at me, okay? All right. We're going to talk about head lettuce first for many reasons. One is I love growing lettuce. The second is from the perspective of how I'm going to present this information to you. It's a very easy way to think about numbers because pretty much in general, a head of lettuce takes up 1 square foot to grow. And we're going to be talking about square feet a lot and how dollars per square feet are super important. Okay, so for growing lettuce, and for growing all vegetables in general. It's a good practice to take soil tests on a regular basis. Variety selection based on the season that you're growing the lettuce, super, super important. There's so many different lettuces, but many of them are not going to do well in this time of the year versus July and August. And I grow lettuce 365 days a year. So, yeah, a lot of variety selection. Okay, so those are some of my favorites for different seasons. I'm absolutely always trialing new varieties. Like I said, I love growing lettuce. Pretty much 1 head per square foot. It's a very easy number to remember. And during the summer, if any of you guys are growing lettuce in the summer, it takes a fair bit of shade cloth, lots of water, very consistent watering, otherwise it bolts. Post-harvest handling is really important if you want to get long shelf life out of your head of lettuce. And you have to set a very stringent seeding schedule so that you can stay on a very stringent transplanting schedule so that you can have it year-round. But if you can have lettuce in July and August at your farmer's market or on your wholesale list, you will sell all of it because other growers probably will not have it. And when the folks come to your farmer's market booth and they're buying your lettuce, they're going to buy other stuff too. All right. I seed lettuce on a pretty much bi-weekly schedule from March through October. And then in October, and just I didn't ask where you guys are from, but because y'all pretty much due west from here, so I am the same growing zone as you guys, pretty much. You might not get quite as cold as we do in the winter, but pretty darn similar. So in October, I do a massive seeding and a massive transplanting of lettuce because those are the lettuces that are going to be harvested. Mine got planted a little late. We haven't started harvesting off of those beds yet, but I'm going to start harvesting that tunnel that is planted in probably another week to 2 weeks, and I'll have lettuce out of that tunnel for all of February. So it's an entire tunnel that is planted very densely to heads of lettuce. And they have grown and they're just sort of sitting there, and they made it just fine, FYI, through negative 14 degrees, 7 days ago. Lots of row cover, buttoned up tight tunnel. They're beautiful. I looked at them yesterday morning before I left. Not yesterday morning, Wednesday morning before I left. Right varieties and lots of row cover, and they did just fine through that week and a half of really, really cold. Okay, so this is the equation that I use for all of my crops, talking about profitability per square foot. All right, so it's total number of bed feet, square feet, times the net price that you're going to sell that crop for, divided by the total number of weeks that that crop is in the ground. Now, that doesn't include the seeding and then the time that you have that little transplant in the greenhouse. This is just the amount of time that that crop is transplanted and in the ground growing between the day that you transplant it to the day that you harvest it. All right. So for head lettuce, my tunnels, not all of my tunnels, but we have to keep it consistent. My tunnels are 200 feet long, 34 feet wide. There's 7 beds in a tunnel. Obviously not the entire length of the tunnel is planted, so I'm going to use 190 linear feet, and I'm going to use the same linear feet for every crop that we're going to talk about to try to keep the numbers consistent for comparison's sake. Okay? 190 linear feet. The beds are 3 foot wide. That means I have pretty much 3 rows of lettuce per bed. Some varieties you can get 4 rows, so more money. And approximately, lettuce is going to be in the ground for 7 weeks. Okay? All right. So, at 190 feet, 3 foot per bed, that's 570 square feet, times the total net price that I'm going to get out of that bed, divided by 7 weeks. All right, so that's 570 heads per bed. I'm going to be realistic and say that I'm probably not going to sell every single head for the full retail price. Probably some of that is going to get damaged. Some of it's going to get sold at a wholesale price. So retail market for me at my farmer's market for big heads of lettuce is $4.50, and retail wholesale price is $3.25 per head. So those are the total numbers: $2,052, $370.50 for those total 570 heads of lettuce. All right. So that's a total of $2,423 over 7 weeks, $346 per week per square foot of that 570 square feet. That's a pretty good number. And it was only 7 weeks. I could do that again many more times. Let's say 3 more times I could do that over the course of a year. Got to give yourself a little bit of wiggle room. But that's pretty good money out of one of those 7 beds in that high tunnel. Now, let's be realistic. Maybe you can't sell 50,000 heads of lettuce a year. That's fine. So we're going to grow different crops. But I can tell you that in July and August, if you have lettuce at your farmer's market or on your wholesale list to your restaurant customers or to a grocery store or whoever it is you're marketing to, they're going to buy it. All right. And there's also so many different kinds of lettuce. You could do lettuce mix. We're going to talk about cut mix next. All right. So, any questions about that before we go? Move on? Okay. I'm going to lump all of these things into one category: arugula, spicy greens mix, lettuce mix, spinach, all the things that are planted very densely, full on in the entire bed. You're going to cut them with a knife or with a pair of scissors, quick cut harvester, whatever. Roughly, think of them all the same way. I think of them all the same way. All right. Ground preparation for this crop is very, very, very critical. You cannot have any weeds. You can have weeds. It just makes harvesting a nightmare. And at some point, if you have so many weeds, it's not worth harvesting the crop because it takes too much time to harvest it. Till it in, start over. Okay. You have to have the right seeding tools. I personally use and really like the 6-row push seeder. I bought it from Johnny's. It's a little finicky, but if you have a really clean seed bed, it works great. I want all of these types of crops, I want them to look like a carpet, like that arugula right there. I don't want there to be rows, distinguishable spare space between the rows. That's why I like that seeder. You know, lots of people use a jang, multiple gangs together, or the 5-row pinpoint seeder. For me, those leave too much space between the rows. I'm still pretty old school, and for 14 years, we have been using scissors. Kind of crazy, but my crew has gotten very good at harvesting this crop. We're growing more of this crop. Let me say that. The last 2 years, we are growing a lot more of these crops because my crew is really good at harvesting these crops. I'm interested in growing even more of them, so I actually have already purchased, it's not here yet, stand-up, full bed harvesting, quick cut greens harvester. because I'm interested in growing more of these. But scissors or knives work great. And for 13 years, that's what I used. If you have somebody that's really slow, your profitability is gonna drop really fast. Yeah.
So this is our first year growing this.
Okay.
We noticed immediately how slow it makes it when you have weeds in there.
So slow.
Pick it out, then you pick it out and you go process it. So by seeding it even heavier, does that help you suppress the weeds, or does that just make it easier to not carry the lettuce plant when you're going to eat?
Okay, I'm gonna repeat the question. We do have some microphones, and so like maybe when we get to the end, if folks have questions, we'll pass the microphones around. But right now, just so the folks in the back know his question, he said it's his first year going to be growing some of these crops, and he has noticed already that there's a lot of weeds, and it is very slow going harvesting with all the weeds that are in the, and he was asking if it would help if the seeding density was higher, like it was a more dense seeding that would help suppress the weeds. And the answer is maybe. Because if you have a really weedy seed bed, it doesn't matter how dense you plant that crop, you're still going to have a lot of weed pressure. So,
That question came to me because we use the Jang.
yeah, and I use the 6 row. So he's using a Jang, multi-row Jang seeder. Maybe. So with the multi-row Jang, you can run a Styropo down that bed, down in between the rows really easily. With this seeding method, there is no weeding to speak of. You could run like a leaf rake, and I have a leaf rake. And so if I think that I'm gonna have a weedy seed bed, you know what was in the bed before you till it up and before you plant it, if you're gonna have a weedy seed bed. So you could run a leaf rake down over this, but it's only sort of effective. But with the Jang, you have enough room that you can run a Styropo or another cultivating implement, and you can just walk down in between those rows that you seeded.
So you're doing bed prep beforehand to make sure.
Yes. Yeah. So right now, I only grow these types of crops, really densely planted types of crops, in my high tunnels. And my high tunnels are many, many, many years old now. And we've really done a good job of getting rid of the weed seed bank in the upper 4 inches of soil. And so at this point, we don't have a ton of weed competition. But with increasing the production, we're going to move outside with my new big harvesting piece of equipment. We're going to start seeding this stuff outside. And I will make sure that those beds that we're going to be planting in have been stale seed bedded a couple of times. You know, you have to be prepared ahead of time before you do your seeding of this crop to make your life so much easier. If you have a really beautiful, relatively weed-free seed bed, you might get 3 harvests off of this bed of lettuce mix or spicy greens mix or arugula, because you cut it and it regrows, and you cut it and it regrows, and boy, your second and your third cuts, that's some money, baby. So it behooves you to make sure that you're starting with a really clean slate. Yep, you betcha. Post-harvest handling, really important. Most important is that this crop get harvested first thing in the morning when it is as cool as possible. And don't pack it into your bin so that it's tightly packed. When you stick your bin into the cooler, airflow, cold air needs to get into that middle part of your bin. So don't pack it in there. It's better to have extra bins lightly packed, maybe not totally full, because otherwise that center part of the bin is going to degrade a lot faster because it took a long time to cool down. The seeding schedule that we follow for these types of crops is every 10 to 12 days, generally. A little bit longer once we get into the middle of the summer. I do not try to grow these through the very, very hottest part of the summer. It's a lot harder to grow these than it is a head of lettuce. All right. So, using the same equation, same square footage, you notice that net price is a whole lot higher because I'm not selling arugula for $4.50 a pound. No way. It's in the ground a lot less time. Perk. So that number of harvested per square foot, it's on the low side. I mean, 3 ounces is a very small amount. But if I told you it was 8 ounces per square foot, the number would ring your head. $12 a pound. Also on the low side, because my retail market, I know this, I don't know why, but my retail farmers market is unusual. I've talked to enough growers all over the country, and they are blown away by the fact that I sell my stuff for $16 a pound. But if I put $16 a pound up there, it's not reasonable for probably your all's market, nor for most people's markets. I hear that $12 a pound is a good certified organic retail price for these things, and so that's the number I'm using. That's a lot of money. Now, it's also a lot of arugula, and maybe you can't sell that much arugula. Maybe that 190-foot bed needs to be divided into thirds, and a third of it's in arugula, and a third of it's in lettuce mix, and a third of it's in a sassy salad mix. But it's still the same number. The number doesn't change. Again, maybe you're gonna sell some of it wholesale. Maybe it's not all gonna go retail, okay? So doing the math, total of $43,399 over 5 weeks is $8,680 per week. Why the heck are we growing anything else? Well, maybe because you can't only sell 190 linear feet of arugula. I can now. I didn't used to be able to. I didn't used to have the market to be able to sell that much arugula. But it's taken 13 years, 14 years, and I've built up the market, and I can sell that much sassy mix too. But it's taken 14 years to build up the market to be able to do that. Any question? Is there a button? No?
I don't know. I'll just so where you say net price up there,
Uh-huh.
that's not really net, that's everything that you're getting in from the crop. Is that correct? Like that's all the money you're getting in from selling it. It's not minus all of my expenses.
No, that is exactly right. No. That starts to get really complicated when you start to factor in your fertilizer cost, your time for weeding, your time for bed prep, your, if you want to get really into the weeds, your, your equipment costs. I mean, there are so many costs that you can and should, in the back of your mind, think about for your cost of production, your labor costs. That net price does not factor in any of that. Because when you start to think about all the costs of the production, it makes that number really, really complicated. And I don't have the time or the brain space to really dive into that stuff. I know that if I can sell these crops at $12 a pound, I can make money and they're profitable. Because I know I can pay all my bills and there's a little bit of money left over. And again, I'm not a numbers person. So I've got a slide at the end of some resources, some books that are great resources that talk about profitability, and some of them really do dig into the costs of production. And so if you are really a numbers person and you want to do that, use some of these books. They're great books. I have them. I've tried to read them. I've tried to wrap my brain around it. It doesn't work for me. I've got too many other things happening all the time, too many other things I have to be thinking about and paying attention to, and this works for me. Okay. For 5 weeks, that's a really good number, and you can plant a lot of arugula and salad mix over the course of a year. You can sell a lot of arugula and salad mix and spinach and this kind of stuff over the course of the year. Okay, so those are good numbers. All right, let's talk about tomatoes. Because everybody loves tomatoes and everybody wants to grow tomatoes, and a lot of people think they make really good money on tomatoes. All right. It takes a lot of fertilizer to grow good tomatoes. It takes a lot of fertilizer over the course of the season to have a really long season of growing tomatoes. It takes a lot of consistent watering. I don't know about you guys, but I, at this point, grow 60% of my tomatoes under cover. So it's expensive growing space in a tunnel. Yeah.
What fertilizer are you using?
Loaded question a little bit. He asked what fertilizer I'm using. I send my soil tests to Midwestern Bioag, and have for many, many years. Like, that's, other than 1 year, that's who my soil tests go to. My fertilizer comes from Midwestern Bioag, and I've been working with the same person at the company that has been helping me think about fertilizer applications based on crop, based on location, for 13 years. They have two basic blends. They have a basic NPK, and then they have one that is, actually, sorry, they have three. They have one that is specifically for solanaceous crops, and they have one that is specifically with some micronutrients added to it. And then a couple of years ago, because I wanted to try and up my tomato production game, I mean, I am not a great tomato grower by any stretch of the imagination, I started fertigating. So during the course of the season, trying to stay on a weekly or bi-weekly fertigation regimen. And the soluble fertilizers that are going in, it's a huge mix of many different micronutrients. I literally couldn't even tell you what all of the things are in that mix because it's not in my brain. There's like 6 different packages of things that we mix up and add into the bucket. If you really want to know, I would be more than happy to get you the information about the solubles. It's just not right here. You guys too, we have a very long tomato growing season. My first tomatoes go in the ground the first week of April in a high tunnel, and the outside production tomatoes after the 3rd transplanting, they are there until frost. So we grow tomatoes for a very long time. Lots of trellising and pruning, lots and lots of labor in a high tunnel to grow tomatoes, but very, very valuable space, and they're planted very densely, so you gotta do a lot of pruning and trellising. Takes a lot of people, and you have to have people that are fast because you could have somebody there the entire day, and that would not be profitable. You can see in the picture right here, I do a lot of interplanting. This is basil, so I've always got a couple of rows of basil. At the first planting, like when we plant in the spring, there's always lettuce transplanted. There's always beets. I've tried lots of different crops interplanted. Some work great and some don't work great. But with a center row of tomatoes down the bed, you've got a lot of space on both sides of that bed, and so you need to use it.
Are you running drip tape?
Yep. 2 lines of drip tape on either side of the tomato plants. 1 line of drip tape for each row that is planted on either side of the tomatoes. So in each bed, there's 4 rows of drip tape. When a tomato gets that big, it needs a lot of water.
And how far away are your tomato spaces?
1 foot. Now, my tunnel planting tomato regimen, there are so many options. There are people that do double leaders. So if you're going to do a double leader, you definitely probably need to be planting them farther than a foot apart. This is a single leader plant. Lots of fertilizer, lots of inputs in order to be able to have 1 foot apart tomatoes. But I am trying to eke out as much money out of that bed as possible for those tomatoes that are in these tunnels. Lots of different varieties, all heirlooms. Well, is that true? All heirlooms. Maybe not, let's say 80% are heirlooms. 3 years ago, I tried for the first time 1 row of grafted tomatoes. So I bought some grafted transplants, and they were so much more productive. That was the only thing that I did different in this 1 row of tomatoes. I planted some grafted tomatoes, and that row was so much more productive than the other rows under all the same growing conditions, that I now, in my tunnels, only plant grafted tomatoes. It's not because of disease. It's not because really of any other factor. It's because the production was so much greater. And I'm not doing my own grafting. Lots of people are doing that. Lots of people are getting into that. I don't have time. I send my seeds to someone. He grows them out for me. I plant the plants. It's a much more expensive transplant, but boy, is it worth it. The seeding schedule that I have is the first seeds go in the ground around the 1st of March, and that's for the tomatoes that we're going to try and transplant early in the spring in the tunnel. Depending on weather, if it looks like it's going to be mildly warm, the last part of February, we might start the seeds at the end of February. We're going to seed in April for our outside transplants. And last year I did a 3rd total transplanting, and the seeds for that 3rd total transplanting, we seeded the first week of June, planted out in July, and we had a beautiful flush. And really, we only had enough time to harvest for about 3 weeks off of that planting at the end of the season, but boy, was it worth it, because nobody else had big, beautiful tomatoes in September. Okay. Post-harvest handling and storage is really important. If you want to get a long shelf life out of your harvested tomatoes, they need to be stored in a separate cooler, 55 degrees. Yeah, lots of airflow, fans. Okay. Again, heirloom tomatoes for me. I sell heirloom tomatoes for $6 a pound at my farmer's market, but not probably all of you are going to be able to get that price. So let's talk about $4.50 a pound, which maybe is on the low end. What are you guys selling heirloom tomatoes for? $4 a pound? $4 a pound? $4.50? $4? Okay. For a 190-foot bed, right? One plant per 12 inches per square foot. All based, these numbers are all based on my math and my plantings, okay? And you better not sell those heirloom tomatoes at a wholesale price, at $4.50 a pound. If you're only getting $4 a pound, you better sell all of them at retail price. That is your net amount of money that you're gonna get. And those tomatoes are probably gonna be relatively productive and reasonable to be in that ground, in that amount of space for about 25 weeks. It's a long time. So that big number, all of a sudden, is kind of a small number when you break it up into 25 weeks. So compared to lettuce or any of those quick cut greens, that's a very small number per square foot of bed space in your tunnel. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm gonna backtrack just a little bit.
Go for it.
I noticed that you had straw in your path.
Yes.
Like, how often do you have to replace your straw, and do you use that across the board or just with your tomatoes as well?
Okay. Did you guys all hear her question about the straw? Okay. We replace, so I chose to use as little weed mat plastic. I use weed mat so that I can use it year after year. I chose to use as little weed mat as possible with straw in between the rows and in between the beds, straw covering the pathways, to try and help with weed pressure, and it helps greatly. It's fantastic. You could just put down solid sheets of weed mat, also great weed protection. We add more straw about once a year. I put it down relatively thick, and that ground in the pathway isn't ever getting tilled up, or, so that straw's not ever getting mixed in with the soil, it's just sitting on top. And because it's fairly thick, it takes about a year before you need to add more. There is a Nissan Altima with Bourbon County plates that is running outside. Does that mean anything to you guys? Nope. Okie dokie smoky. Okay. The straw in the summer isn't as necessary, but in the winter, I find it really helps with overall tunnel warmth. It's great for helping keep the weeds down. It's really great for when you forget to turn your irrigation off and you flood your tunnel, and then you're not walking through mud. You use wood chips, so I have a very good, reliable, relatively cheap source of straw, and so I use straw. Yeah. When they start to be not as productive, I use Sanidate as much as possible. That's the only spray that I use on my tomatoes. When they start to show a lot of, like when their production goes down so much that it's like, why am I harvesting these tomatoes? I mean, there's still tomatoes on those plants. I yank them out. I'm done. Because I've got 2 more plantings elsewhere. Yep. I have a lot of fans in my high tunnels, so there's a lot of airflow in my high tunnels. There's 30% shade cloth on my tunnels. We are very diligent about pruning, keeping the leaf This is so crazy. I have Spanish in my brain right now, so I was just about ready to say the Spanish word for taking the leaves off. We don't leave leaves on the plants. Below the tomato cluster, there are no leaves. This is my high tunnel. This is only my high tunnels, right? So very diligent about pruning, and not one leaf finds its way under the ground. They all leave the tunnel when that pruning happens. Yep.
Do you have to rotate those tomatoes?
You betcha. I follow 3-year rotation.
So those will be grown in different housings.
Yep. And I totally understand that maybe that's not possible for you guys. Maybe you don't have that many tunnels, but you're going to have a lot more disease problems. Just know that. Did you have a...
Yeah, maybe you answered it earlier. I was just curious about your irrigation schedule.
Oh, with the drip tape? It depends on...
Different stages of the plant.
Yeah, totally depends on how big the plant is. In the peak of the season when the plants are huge, we are watering, and it's really hot. We are watering 3 times a week for 30 to 45 minutes at a time. But that's using, 4-inch drip tape. That's the highest flow drip tape. I can't tell you what that number is. But it depends a lot on what your drip tape is, what the spacing of the drip tape is, how many other things you're watering at the same time. Yeah. But that's what I'm doing.
And the shade cloth, you got on for like 3 months?
We usually put shade on our tunnels the first week of June, end of May, and it comes off sometime into September. I actually think I've had some conversations with other very, very good Mennonite tomato growers in my world. I actually think that the tomatoes would benefit from a 45% shade. But a shade cloth piece for these big tunnels is very expensive. And so I've got 30%, and that's what I'm sticking with for right now. But what I also can tell you that we on average have a 2-week period of blossom drop where we don't have any production because it's so hot in the middle of the summer. Okay, getting back to our math. $37.50 per week. That's how much you can expect to get per square foot off of a tomato crop. And that's a really healthy tomato crop that is producing a lot of tomatoes. Remember the number from lettuce? You could grow 3 lettuce crops if you were really, really on it in that same amount of space, in that same amount of time that you're growing those tomatoes. Just think about that for a minute. Okay. How about cherry tomatoes? Pretty much you grow them the same way you do regular tomatoes. You better have somebody or a few people that really like to pick cherry tomatoes. Because if you're growing tomatoes in that spacing, in that amount of linear footage, blah, 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 you're going to have a lot of cherry tomatoes to pick. I don't know what you guys... I really would prefer, doesn't always work, but I would prefer to only grow cherry tomatoes in a high tunnel so that I can control the watering, because I cannot afford split cherry tomatoes. And if it rains, you're going to have split cherry tomatoes. It doesn't always work. We planted some cherry tomatoes outside last year. Luckily, it was a drought. It didn't rain at all. So that was fine, but it doesn't, it often doesn't work like that. But if you're growing cherry tomatoes outside, you're going to have split cherry tomatoes, and that's a lot of wasted money. Okay. Just like big tomatoes, circulation and air circulation is super critical. I have a lot of fans in my high tunnels. Lots of time spent trellising and pruning. Harvest time is real. We go out and harvest tomatoes as a team. The flower crew harvests tomatoes when it's tomato harvest season. The pack shed crew harvests tomatoes when it's tomato harvest season. It makes the harvest go a lot faster, and everybody can get on to the other things that need to happen during the day. This picture that you're looking at is a single piece of twine, single string, and tomato clips that go every other sucker, pretty much, like every other branch. A tomato clip goes onto the string, go around the plant. It's a roller that hangs on a metal cable at the top of above the bed. Johnny sells them. I mean, they're available from multiple companies, but it's a roll, a spool of twine. Variety selection, if you're growing them in a tunnel, for me, multicolors cherry tomatoes sell, so I just sort of grow lots of different ones because in the basket I want to have lots of colors. My seeding schedule is about the same for as big tomatoes, but I only do 2 transplantings of cherry tomatoes, not 3. And the numbers are about the same. So I didn't do the math, but the numbers are about the same for cherry tomatoes as they are for big tomatoes. Okay. Let's see. I'm not going to go through specific numbers for peppers, but peppers are a little bit less dollar per square foot than tomatoes, but they also take a lot less work. So I put peppers up here because dollars per square foot with a lot less labor to grow them, that $37 per square foot all of a sudden makes a little bit more sense. One thing about peppers, at least for us, and probably for you guys, I found that I was planting peppers too early. They do not like to be cold. They are not as resilient as a tomato plant. It would behoove all of us to wait a little bit before you put your peppers in the ground. The plants will be much happier and they will grow much better for you. Now, if you're gonna put them into a tunnel that you've been able to, close up, and so the soil temperature is quite a bit warmer, maybe you could plant them earlier. But if you're planting peppers outside, just wait a few weeks. Those plants that you plant 3 weeks later are gonna catch up to the plants that you planted 3 weeks earlier because they just don't like to be cold. Lots of varieties. Don't plant them too early. I seed our pepper crop the second week of March. I only have one really big seeding of a lot of different types. Yeah. Oh, I did put this in here. Okay, that's good. The 5 pounds per plant, that's a relatively reasonable number, especially for, big bell peppers. I do put shade cloth over my plants, and boy, do they love it. I mean, at the end of the summer, we're harvesting off of plants that are this tall. They love the shade. It's still hot, so they grow great. And you really reduce your sun scalding a lot by having shade cloth over them. So that's great. Peppers are bell peppers, not like the small jalapenos and all the variety of different hot peppers. I sell those at quite a bit higher than $6 a pound. But for sweet bells, those are $6 a pound. That's, $1.50 a pepper-ish. Maybe a little bit more, $1.75. That's a super reasonable price. Even the conventional growers at my market sell their peppers for that. All right, so that's our number, our math on per square foot of peppers. That's not very much money. But the amount of labor is a lot less. So the money starts to make a little bit more sense. I Florida weave peppers, and I know some people that single trellis them, but I don't do that. We Florida weave them, every once a week during really peak growing season, but we don't do that many times. They're planted on either weed mat or on plastic, so there's very little weeding. In the tunnels, we interplant them, so maybe when the first peppers go out, maybe they've got lettuce beside them or beets or something. So we are making good use of that bed space, but again, a lot less labor than tomatoes. All right. Just a reminder about how much tomatoes are. Okay, radishes. This is a very profitable crop. I grow them in the spring and in the fall. And in the fall, I grow a lot of storage radishes. And we're still selling storage radishes that were harvested in November and early December in the cooler, where they're coming out of the cooler. Very, very profitable. There's so many different varieties. Really big, huge piles sell. It's a very good interseeded crop, along with other bigger, longer season crops. It doesn't take very long, 28 days, they're out of that bed. And we pretty much, through the spring, we direct seed them every couple of weeks so that we have a very consistent, always have radishes for the first few months in the season. Okay, celery, one of my favorites. Oh my gosh. All right. Celery is of the things that I grow, celery and Brussels sprouts are the longest amount of time requiring crop that I grow. And so over the amount of, let's say, how would I say this? If I was really low on tunnel space, I only grow them in a tunnel. If I only had a few tunnels, I probably wouldn't grow celery, because celery is going to take up that tunnel space for an incredibly long time. We start celery in our greenhouse in April, and the first heads of celery are harvested the week before Thanksgiving. But they're huge. I sell a head of celery, you can see how tall they are. I sell a head of celery for $9. I sell a bunch of celery for $7. So before that head is harvested, there's some leaves, outside leaves, harvested off of all of those heads to make bunches. So I almost get 2 harvests off of each plant. And nobody else at my farmer's market has it. So it's a really good crop. But again, if you were really low on tunnel space, I don't know if I would grow it, because it takes up so much ground for such a long amount of time. It also takes a lot of water, and you have to be really consistent with your watering. Mm-hmm.
That'd be a good one to follow behind the tomatoes if you're rotating your tomatoes out.
Ooh, to put in your tunnel, in that tunnel space, if you're not going to grow tomatoes. Is that what you're saying?
Is that the same time frame we were talking about?
These take longer than tomatoes, but sure, why not? Why not grow celery one year tomatoes, and then something else in that tunnel space for the third year. You bet. I still have celery in the tunnel that it was planted in right now. Celery's super hardy. The leaves, the plants that are in the tunnel right now, the leaves that froze are not good, but the plant is still alive. And the plant will start growing again once it warms up and we start to have more day length. So I will harvest off those leaves that are no good. The cells bursted, they burst. So I'll harvest off those leaves. I'll wait a month and a half and I'll have beautiful heads of celery in mid to late April. So there's not a ton in those 3 beds that were in that tunnel, but there's still some beautiful celery out there.
So it's in there almost the entire year then?
Yep. To the time that you end harvest. You don't have to plant that much. Plant what you think you're going to be able to sell in November and December. But every year I plant more than I did last year. Because once you have a customer that has eaten celery that we have grown, they are not ever going to, they will buy celery from the grocery store, but it's so not comparable. Yeah. Sorry. Okay, let's split through these. I think we talked about a bunch of this stuff already. Very, very consistent watering. Ooh, super, super, super important. It does need shade in the summer. Apples and oranges compared to store-bought. You can sell it for a lot of money. You can make a lot of money. It doesn't take. I do plant my celery on plastic. It's almost impossible to grow it not on plastic. It's in the ground for such a long time, and it grows so slowly. The weed pressure. It's hard to keep up on the weeding. So it just makes it worth growing it either on weed mat or on plastic. It grows so slowly. It's amazing. Yeah, mid-seeding in April. Okay. Is anybody growing ginger? Yeah, awesome. Ginger's very fun. It falls in the category of if I didn't have a lot of tunnel space, I also probably wouldn't grow it. But it is a very unique crop. It's in the ground for a long time. It definitely needs shade cloth. You have to hill it like you do potatoes. Thank you very much. It takes a lot of fertilizer. Every time you hill it, you add more fertilizer. It certainly is beautiful. Look at that amazingly gorgeous, interesting. Very likely nobody else at your market has this. It takes a long time to grow. You get your corms in January, and you start them in your greenhouse, and by mid to late September, you're probably harvesting your first crop. So you're taking care of it for a long time. It takes a lot of water also. I would say somewhat market dependent. Fresh ginger is gorgeous, and once you get if you can get people to try it, they will love it. But also not a lot of people cook with ginger. So you have to make sure that you have a market that would support and would buy your ginger crop. It cannot handle cold temperatures at all. So you have kind of a short window of when you're harvesting and then when you're selling it. And it doesn't store great. So it's not like you can harvest it and then keep it in your walk-in cooler for 3 months, because it's not going to be great in 3 months. Okay, who's doing flowers? So per square foot, flowers by far, hands down, make the most money of all the crops possible. But You have to have a good market to be able to sell flowers. And God love all the other growers that are selling at your farmer's market that are selling zinnias for 25 cents a stem. They are just burning their money. So if you are going to try and compete with those growers at your market that are selling sunflowers for 50 cents a stem and zinnias for $5 a bunch, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. But per square foot, you can make very good money selling flowers. It is very market dependent. Growing flowers is quite different than growing vegetables, and there's a whole nother set of information that you have to have in your brain and know about growing all of the different cut flowers that there are. I almost, at this point in the size of the farm, I pretty much need someone that is the flower grower, just because it is an entirely different beast than vegetables. And with the amount of flowers that we're growing compared to the amount of vegetables that we're growing, I almost need a second person who's managing the flowers. And I'm working towards that right now, hopefully. So I put heat versus no heat up there because if you want to have early spring flowers, and that's when I can sell the most flowers compared to all year long, in the spring, into March, April, May, Mother's Day, you have to have some heat. And you have to have some heat that you can put to that tunnel that you either started planting in February, or you have stuff that you planted in September and it's gotten started and they're little bitty plants. You have to have a little bit of heat if you're going to meet that all of April and early May window. But Mother's Day, holy mackerel. Yeah. They take a lot, more than even tomatoes. They do take a lot of nutrition. And it almost doesn't matter. I mean, maybe zinnias don't, maybe sunflowers don't. But most of the cut flowers take a lot of fertilizer. You do have to trellis almost all of them because in any covered growing space, they're going to get really tall and they're going to fall over or they're going to grow crooked. So you do have to trellis them. There's so many different varieties. I don't have this problem, but I have friends that are having a lot of bumping up against their organic certifiers for the growing flowers. And so if you haven't moved into the direction of growing flowers, but you are certified organic, I might ask your certifier how they interpret the rules for production and how your certifier is going to handle your production of growing cut flowers. It's interesting, and I mean, I know because I've worked with enough different certifiers and with the NOP that the interpretation of the rules from certifier to certifier, it's pretty different. So just something to think about if you want them to be certified organic and part of your production. Okay, seeding schedule is absolutely just as rigorous as, let's say, a lettuce crop. How about? Lots of successions of planting flowers. Okay. Yeah.
Would you say with flowers it's more labor, less, the same than vegetables?
Less than lettuce. No, so sorry. More than lettuce, less than tomatoes. More than peppers, probably. Less than tomatoes. Uh-huh. This is the list of resources that I mentioned at the beginning. One of my favorite books, and I'm not sit down and read a book cover to cover. I have this question. I need to know the answer to the question, so I go and find the answer to the question in the book. But one of my favorite books that talks about crop profitability, and that also was easiest for me to understand, is the Fearless Farm Finances book that Moses put out a bunch of years ago. These other ones are really good, and I use them, I have them. I've attended a lot of workshops that talk about crop profitability. So hopefully you can have the opportunity to do that also, to really start to wrap your mind around it. And then visit a lot of farms. I've learned everything that I know from other farmers. And just as a reminder, just so you can have it up there in case you didn't get it written down before, that's the equation. And we definitely have, does anybody have questions? How about that? Yeah.
In your flower production, I know you're doing cut flower.
Yep.
Also doing potted flower to sell, like poinsettia or something like that in pot.
He asked if I am growing potted plants, flowers, in addition to the cut flowers, and no, I am not. I do grow herbs, and in the spring I sell some transplants, but not a lot. Yeah.
Great talk, and I love this framework. It seems very manageable without having to get into the nitty-gritty of every cost of production thing. Do you have a baseline for your farm that's when I see X cost below this X dollars per week, this crop is just not worth it to me?
Yeah, tomatoes.
Do you have a dollar amount? Like the threshold for you is $40 or
$75.
so definitely no tomatoes.
I grow tomatoes, but my God, they don't make very much money. And that's at $6 a pound, you guys? That's at $6 a pound. Yep.
And is that just for the marketing aspect of tomatoes? You need tomatoes on your farm stand?
Yes, I have to have big, beautiful heirloom tomatoes. I have so much competition at my farmers. So just background, right? It all is in context to your market. But there's 100 vendors that sell at my farmer's market. 98% of them are not certified organic. Thank you so much. Lots of tomatoes. Lots of big, beautiful red tomatoes at my farmer's market. Not very many heirlooms. Very few heirlooms. So yes, I need to have tomatoes at my market. I think I have the next slide. I have to have a big display of tomatoes. Yeah. I have a CSA also, so I have to have tomatoes. I gotta have tomatoes and put them in my CSA shares. Yeah.
Your tomato varieties, I know you say heirlooms.
Mm-hmm.
Do the Hollands, those are kind of,
Those I consider heirlooms.
okay.
You bet. But they're still grafted. I'm still grafting. Yep.
How do you price your flowers out, your cut flowers?
I didn't hear you.
How do you price your cut flowers out? Like in bunches?
Yep. I do sell, of certain things, I do sell 10-stem bunches of straight foxglove, or maybe 8-stem bunches because they're huge. So there's a few types of flowers that I sell straight stem bunches of those things: ranunculus, delphinium, snapdragons. But mostly, the majority of the flowers that I sell, I'm selling at farmer's market. So they're in mixed bunches. And I have 3 different sizes: small, medium, and large. Yeah.
What do you price those
15, 25, and 45. That's the mixed bunches. They get wrapped in a paper sleeve. There's a colorful insert of, like a colorful insert that goes in the sleeve. I have a care tip sheet for taking care of them once you get them home that's stapled inside the sleeve with a little flower food packet. I have a punch card for bouquets. So after you've bought 10, you get a free one. It's not applicable to the $15 bouquet, but it is for the medium and large size bouquets. I do the same punch card for pounds of tomatoes at market.
So just kind of a follow-up question. A few years ago, there was a cut flower workshop here, and one of the things that she mentioned was as the economy goes up and down, flowers are the first thing to not get purchased or to get purchased. Do you see that as well?
Yeah, you bet. You bet. And for my market, in the middle of the summer, during peak flower production, all the people that buy flowers leave Columbia. So there's usually about a month in the middle of the summer when people are traveling that my flower sales really, I'm not selling that much at market. But you know what? That's okay. Because when I have leftover flowers at the end of the market and I can give them to the staff that's working at the farmer's market, when I can give them to some vendors, that's great. It makes me feel great. It makes them feel great. They love them. And,
Yeah, I feel like that just goes back to what you're saying about, like, what do you enjoy growing? So
Yeah.
you made it really clear you don't enjoy growing tomatoes. You have to. But it's okay to grow the flowers because you also just get to give them away, and that's great.
Yeah. And during the rest of the season, I'm most often selling out of the flowers that I take to market. And Mother's Day weekend, boy, you want to talk about making some money. If you have a good amount of flowers on Mother's Day weekend, you will sell them all. And it has been very consistently my highest market day of the year for the last 5 years because I have a lot of flowers. Yep. Thank you. Uh-huh. I would be happy to. The ones that I very consistently, and I always am like, ooh, that looks like a cool one. Let's grow that this year. You would think I would learn, but I don't. The ones that I 100% always have are brandy wines, pinks, yellows, thank you very much, reds, Cherokee purple, striped German, green zebra, and if I could tell you, my brain would work. There's a new, relatively new, 3, 4 years, 5 years. There's a new hybrid striped German that I have been growing, and I love it. But right this minute, I can't think of what it's called. Gin Fizz. Thank you very much. Gin Fizz. It's awesome. What else is on my table there? There's a really good red heirloom. I don't. So, super good example. I don't keep variety names in my head because there's too many. But I have a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet, that is my seeding log that I tweak a little bit every year, but mostly it's the same stuff now every year. And if you wanted to email me, I could send it to you. And then you would see the list of the varieties of the things that I grow. There's just so many. I'd only have so much brain space up here. Yep.
You said you like to try and utilize the space around the tomatoes.
Oh, yeah.
Prune them tall. Do you do any herbs there?
No. Only basil. Only basil. Uh-huh. I've grown a lot of things in that inner planted space, and some things do great, but some things don't. Lettuce, super consistent, does great. Beets, super consistent, do great. Radishes, not so great. Hawkeye turnips, not so great. They're gone. You know, all the thing, your goal is to plant something that's a really short season, doesn't take very long, is harvested and is out of there. Yeah, you don't want to have something that's still growing in there 3 months, 2 months after, 3 months after it was planted. Those tomatoes are now too big. You're going to be stepping on them while you're trying to prune. You need it to be a quick crop that you interplant. I tried fennel, not great. It doesn't have enough sunlight. Scallions, also not so great. The thrips are just too much. Mm-hmm. No. Mm-mm. I'm growing for the first time, well, this is my third year growing forcing tulips, and I have a lot of tulips this year compared to previous years. And we've also had what I would say is maybe less sunny days than normal. And I think that my greenhouse for those tulips would benefit from some extra light. And so I've been looking at, I don't have it yet, but I think I'm gonna buy some because I'm gonna keep growing tulips. And I think I need to put some external lights in my greenhouse for those tulips. Yeah. No heat. I had 2 layers of Pro 30 row cover, big sheets, not over each individual bed, but the entire tunnel under one big sheet, keeping that whole space warmer. Hoops, so the row cover's not laying on the lettuce. And it's inside, this is the thing that I was actually really surprised about. It's not in a high tunnel. It's in a caterpillar tunnel that's 16 feet wide, 300 foot long. I mean, truly, I didn't think that it was going to make it. I thought, and if anything was going to be damaged, I thought that the outside rows would be damaged. The inside stuff I thought would look good. The entire tunnel is beautiful. Ripe varieties. You know, they were not, and they are not ready to harvest. You know, had they been big, mature heads of lettuce, I truly do not think that they would have, I mean, some of them maybe in the middle might have made it, but they would have had a much more damage than they do. They have no damage. They're gorgeous. They're going to be ready to harvest in 2-3 weeks. So it was the right timing, the right stage of growth, the right varieties. They were not, they weren't, I watered. I knew it was going to get this super, super cold. And so about a week before, when I was seeing these cold temperatures coming, I watered the tunnel. Thank you very much. Mm-hmm.
Head lettuce versus mixed cut lettuce.
Uh-huh.
What do you see in your market?
Say that one. What do I see as my market?
No, head lettuce versus mixed lettuce in the bag.
Uh-huh. Most customers at my market would prefer lettuce mix. Lettuce mix is a lot more work. Head lettuce is a lot less work. I do not try to have cut mixes in the middle of the summer when it's really hot. I just have head lettuce. In the spring, you know, I like to have lots of different varieties of head lettuce, butter crunches and leaf lettuces and some romaines in, you know, May, early June. But then I also have bagged mixes. I know that most customers go to the bagged mix first. It's easier for them. Uh-huh.
How do you present your lettuce at the market when it's hot?
Well, not necessarily because it was hot, but because I was so tired of people picking up 5 heads of lettuce before they decide on the one that they want. I started putting my lettuce in a plastic bag. Not closed, but if you can envision this, and this is like a big head of magenta lettuce. The bottom of the bag comes up onto the bottom of the head of lettuce. A large rubber band holds the bag in place, and the tip top of the head of lettuce is sticking out of the bag. And I kid you not, people don't pick up 5 of them anymore. They pick up 1 and they put it in their bag or in their basket. And number one, it cut down drastically on the amount of lettuce that I was having at the end of the day that was beaten up and not sold. It was the idea of one of my employees, and it was probably the best idea. It is awesome. And you know, my bags have my sticker on them, so it's some good marketing, and the heads look beautiful. It does take a little bit more work to do that, but totally worth it for the fact that I have very little waste at the end of the market now. Yeah, you betcha. Triple sink, triple dunk. The last dunk has Sanidate in it. He asked if I washed the lettuce. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Have you found a companion plan for your tomatoes that has helped with disease? You mentioned you put lettuce in different things, or other people talk about carrots. Have you found one that works better than others?
For disease purposes?
Yeah, try to just protect the thing,
No. Not for disease purposes.
Can you tell us how you wash your leaf lettuce?
She asked how I wash leaf lettuce. I just have a 3-bay stainless steel sink. They're big, big tubs. I mean, it's a commercial wash sink. Fill it up with water. The head of lettuce. I'm gonna move over here and talk loud so I can use my hands and show you. I hold the butt of the head of lettuce with because I'm right-handed, and because I'm moving this direction, the sinks are like this. I need to use my hands. Thank you so much. Thanks. The butt of the head of lettuce is in this hand. My left hand is on top of the head of lettuce, gently holding it together. The head of lettuce goes down into the water, flips over, and comes out of the water, butt end up first. Second sink, whoosh. Third sink, whoosh. And then I grab the head of lettuce with both hands like this to kind of hold it together, give it one shape, stick it in a crate that is just draining. Stick it in the crate upside down, draining, and then those heads get put into bins that they go into the walk-in. If the lettuce is not that dirty, it might just get 2 dunks, 1 wash and 1 Sanidate dunk. And it's fast. I mean, it's like this.
And what about the cut greens?
I have a bubbler sink. They go and they're Sanidate in the water in the bubbler sink. They just get dumped in the sink, bubbler turned on for a few seconds. They get scooped into a plastic fish basket. The basket goes into a spinner. Basket comes out of the spinner, sits on a draining table, and somebody over here is taking it out of the basket and putting it in the bags. Weighing it, putting it in the bags.
You dump it on the drain table, or you just put the basket?
Put the basket on the drain table. And the basket is not filled all the way. It's only, if you fill it all the way, it gets too wonky in the spinner, and it gets off balance. So maybe only about half full. And it's just sitting on the drain, and really it's mostly dry. There's probably not really that much draining on the drain table, but there's, 4 baskets there sitting there while the person or 2 people are bagging over here. Do you guys like the equation? Are you guys math people? Not math people? Math people, she's a math person. Equation's great. Good. I did not come up with this. This is not my idea, this equation, but it is it's the thing that worked for me. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, what kind of spinner do you have for the lettuce? Okay.
All right, I'm here all weekend, so happy to talk about anything. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Liz. This is the end of this session. Thank you so much for coming in. Don't forget the session feedbacks. Leave it on your chair, your table. If you need one, just let me know. Thank you.